I never should have clicked the link. It was a late Friday night, and I was sitting in my small apartment scrolling through forums I had no business being on. The dark web had always fascinated me, not because I wanted to buy drugs or weapons, but because I was obsessed with the bizarre things people claimed to find there. Secret clubs, cursed videos, human experiments. I didn't believe most of it, but that night, I found something different. A thread titled, "You are invited to a wedding." The post was simple. It had a date, a location, and a single rule. Once you RSVP, you must attend. There was no explanation, no details, just an anonymous user posting the same message over and over again. I clicked the RSVP link out of curiosity. The screen flashed white for a second, then nothing. No confirmation, no new page, just silence. I shrugged it off and went to bed. 2 days later, an actual invitation arrived at my front door. A thick black envelope with no stamp, no address, just my name written in perfect calligraphy. I opened it. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of the century. Attendance is mandatory. Do not be late." The location was an abandoned church about an hour outside the city. I should have thrown it away, but something about it felt personal, like someone was watching me. So, against every rational thought, I went. The church sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dead trees and forgotten farmland. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. Tall, rotting, the stained glass windows covered in grime. My stomach turned as I stepped inside. There were people in the pews, dozens of them, all dressed in black. Their faces were hidden by veils, their hands folded neatly in their laps. The air was thick, with something metallic, something foul. At the front of the church stood the bride, a tall, gaunt woman in a filthy white dress. Her veil was sheer enough to see her face underneath. Sunken eyes, a twisted grin. Beside her stood a man in a suit that didn't fit right, his head tilted unnaturally to one side. Then she spoke. "Our final guest has arrived. Let the ceremony begin." The doors behind me slammed shut. I turned, but 2 men in masks blocked the exit. My pulse pounded. This wasn't a wedding. It was a trap. The bride lifted her arms, and the guests all stood in unison. Their movements were stiff, unnatural. That's when I noticed the smell. Rotting meat, decay. My stomach lurched. These people weren't just guests. They were dead. The groom stepped toward me, his head lolling as he reached for me. "You will take his place," the bride whispered. I bolted. I crashed through the pews, knocking over bodies that crumbled like dried out husks. Hands clawed at me as I ran, but I didn't stop. I threw myself at a stained glass window, the glass shattering around me as I hit the ground outside. I ran to my car, barely able to breathe. The figures in black stood in the broken window, watching unmoving. The bride simply smiled. I didn't stop driving until I reached the city. I went straight to the police. At first, they didn't believe me. When they investigated the church, they found something worse than I could have imagined. In the basement, they uncovered hundreds of bodies. Some were fresh, but most were not. The place was a graveyard, a hunting ground for a cult that had been operating in the shadows for years. The so-called wedding was a ritual, and almost was their sacrifice. The news broke about a week later. The police arrested several members, but the bride, she was never found. I moved after that, changed my phone number, deleted everything. But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear a soft knock at my door, like someone delivering an invitation. And every time I wonder, what if I had just never clicked that link?